Hi, I'm Carrie,
And I'm Emily.
and we are the voices of A Nice Cup of History, your favourite, hopefully, history podcast. And we are back after a long hiatus because, coronavirus. We hope that you're all staying as safe and well as possible, and we are going to try and alleviate some of the lockdown boredom wherever you are in the world with some education. And this week we're doing Catherine the Great, the famous Russian empress who may or may not have had sexual relations with a horse. We'll come to that later.
And stay around for this week's ridiculous death, where we find out why it's not a good idea to piss off cats, especially the big kind.
Without further ado,
Let's get historical.
So, Catherine. She wasn't actually called Catherine.
Well, of course she wasn't, because that would make sense.
No. She very helpfully actually wrote her own memoirs, so a lot of this information is well recorded.
Oh.
She was born Sophie Frederica August Prinzessin von Anhalt-Zerbst on the 2nd of May, 1729, in Stettin in Prussia, which is now Szczecin in Poland.
I'm going to say now before this starts that if you're a regular listener to our podcast, you will know I'm not good with the whole, words, which isn't fab, ideally, for a host of a podcast. So if I say anything that is mispronounced, I deeply apologise.
Fair enough. If I say anything that's mispronounced, I apologise as well.
Carrie's less likely to do it. That's why she does all the big words usually.
Yeah. She was the daughter of Johanna Elizabeth of Holstein-Gottorp and Christian August of Anhalt-Zerbst. And she was actually engaged at the age of 14 to her cousin, Karl Ulrich, the Duke of Holstein-Gottorp.
Yeah, where's that?
Prussia, so like modern-day Poland.
Oh, okay.
Karl was the grandson of Tsar Peter the Great of Russia and heir to the Russian throne. Whilst his actual name was Karl, he was styled Grand Duke Peter.
I get that, because I'm not I don't know. Karl doesn't seem, no offence to any Karls, I just don't know if there's any regal people with the name of Karl.
Yeah, you've got like Tsar Peter, Tsar Nicholas, Tsar Alexandra, Tsar Karl.
Exactly, it needs to have 2 syllables, I think.
Yeah. Do you want to go next, sorry?
Yeah, in 1744, Sophie, as she would like to be known as Catherine, arrived in Russia, and after being baptised into the Russian Orthodox faith, much to her Lutheran father's displeasure, she became the Grand Duchess Catherine
Alexeyevna.
Thank you. And in 1745, she and her cousin Peter/Karl were married.
Do you want me to do this one because it's quite long?
Oh my Christ, yes.
Her official royal title, by the time she was empress, was Ekaterina II, by the grace of God, empress and autocrat of all the Russians at Moscow, Kiev, Vladimir, Novgorod, Tsarina of Kazan, Tsarina of Astrakhan, Tsarina of Siberia, Lady of Pleskov and Grand Duchess of Smolensk, Duchess of Estonia and Livland, Karolyal, Tver, Ugoria, Permia, Vyatka and Bulgaria and others, Lady and Grand Duchess of Novgorod and in the Netherlands of Chernigov, Reson, Rostov, Yaroslav, Belusriel, Udoria, Obdoria, Kondinia, and ruler of the entire northern region and Lady of the Urish, of the Karthalinian and the Gurushnian Tsars, and the Kabardinian land, of the Cherkessian and the Gaussian princes, and the Lady of the Manor and sovereign of many others.
Jesus, what a name!
So we'll just call her Catherine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we'll just talk a little bit about Russia at the time. Russia was ruled by the Empress Elizabeth. She was the daughter of Peter the Great and therefore the aunt of Peter Karl.
She ruled for 20 years, and she's quite ambitious about emulating the courts of Europe, because the courts of Europe at the time were quite decadent. You're talking like the Georgian era over here. They were decadent, lots of lush outfits, lots of gossip. We had the debutantes and everything. Yeah.
Lots of food, lots of drink, lots of opulence.
Yeah, they had the court at Versailles at this time.
Yeah. By all accounts, she kept a luxurious and decadent court devoted to pleasure and entertainment. One thing to note, however, the way of the Russian succession is a bit of a minefield. It wasn't necessarily passed to the next male heir through blood, like it is or has been through the English
like the
royal family. Yeah, it was a bit more like the Roman Empire method. Blood succession was possible, but so was succession from husband to wife or through appointment as an heir by the emperor/empress.
So if the emperor decided that you would be a better heir than your father or your mother or your brother, then they could name you as their heir in their will. Elizabeth died on the 5th of January 1762 and Peter ascended to the throne. Now, the dates that we've given here are the dates in the new system. They did have a different calendar at this time because they then joined the Gregorian calendar, same as England did around about the 1750s. So the dates will appear different, or some sources will give you two dates. So we've gone for the latter date, which is the latest one. So 5th of January 1762, she died and Peter ascended the throne to be Tsar Peter III.
And at that time, Russia was engaged in the 7 Years' War with them, Austria, and France on one side, and Prussia on the other. Peter didn't want to fight against his hero, so when he became Tsar Peter III, he sued for peace with Frederick II.
He full-on hero worshipped Frederick II to an absurd degree, and he was like, no, I do not want this. I don't want this war with him. He is my hero, and just like, no. Catherine took this as a sign of his weakness and his hatred for Russia compared to the land of his birth, being born in Prussia, same as she was. Meanwhile, she was doing everything that she could to embrace her new home. When she actually arrived in Russia, she caught pleuritis or pleurisy, which is an inflammation of the tissue between the lungs and the rib cage, which can cause chest pains, coughing, and trouble breathing. And the cure for this at the time was bloodletting, where she'd be cut to make herself bleed a set amount, and she did this up to 4 times a day to remove the bad humours that caused it. It nearly cost her life. And then in 1744, she developed pneumonia by walking around her bedroom barefoot at night, practicing her Russian pronunciation because it wasn't her native language. And that was so severe, again, that she nearly died. So basically, she's trying that hard to integrate herself into Russian society that it nearly killed her twice.
That proves that she really cared, and she knew that she had quite a responsibility, so wanted to, take that seriously.
Yeah, and it did massively ingratiate her early on with the Russian people. Like they appreciated that. She obviously survived both, and she went on with, frankly, an unhappy marriage. It was evident to her from pretty early on that Peter wasn't really fit to rule, and she understood that should anything happen to him, then the throne would pass to her in the first instance. Just remember that.
Apologies, I just clicked my shoulder really loud.
You're an old woman.
Yeah, I am. This marriage was obviously not particularly happy for Catherine. Peter was unstable, neurotic, he was an alcoholic, he was stubborn, and according to some, possibly impotent.
Yeah.
Which isn't great when you need to produce an heir.
Well, no.
No. As we said before, Peter did hero worship Frederick II of Prussia, who happened to be the enemy of the then Empress Elizabeth.
Yeah. Catherine, on the other hand, was progressive, intelligent, articulate. She demonstrated a passion and a love for Russia that made her quite popular with its people. However, the people in court mistrusted her because of her Prussian origins, and her progressive views made them quite suspicious of her. Like, they were okay with Peter because of his progressive origins, because, he was the natural grandson. She was actually second cousins with Peter, so she was related to Peter the Great, but she was woman, so she was the outsider, which wasn't cool.
No, reports are that she wasn't necessarily beautiful, but she was charming and charismatic.
Yeah.
She had at least 3 lovers that are known of, though there may have been many more than this.
Yeah, chances are that there probably was. And one of the things, because we got some fascinating facts about her at the end, one of the things we'll realise she had a bit of a proclivity for extramarital activities, should we just say.
It's a very nice way of putting it.
Yeah. She was horny.
Fab.
Yeah, it's been hinted, not least of all by Catherine herself in her memoirs and actually out loud, that the children that she had were not by Peter.
Oh, God.
She had 3 children that survived within their marriage, although one was born after. And yeah, she basically said none of them were his, which kind of lends credence to the impotence claims.
She did, however, suffer through 2 miscarriages in December of 1752 and in June of 1753. Both of these were attributed to her lover,
Sergei Vasilievich Saltykov.
He was rumoured to have taken her virginity when her husband failed to do his marital duty, though this is not substantiated and may just be legend.
Yeah, it might just be Catherine's way of just kind of salting Peter's wounds.
Sticking the knife in a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to do it, insult a man's manhood.
Well, yeah, definitely. After her second miscarriage, she failed to produce the afterbirth or the placenta, and this made her gravely ill. I mean, that is still, obviously, that's still a thing now,
Yeah.
but it's not easy. It's something that still affects a lot of women.
It can cause infection and death because basically you've got something inside you that is then dead inside
Yeah.
you.
She did, however, pass it naturally, but 13 days later. So it wasn't pleasant for her. She would have been very, very poorly.
Yeah.
So this woman, this is almost, from what I can make out, she's almost survived death 3 times at the moment.
Yeah.
2 miscarriages and she survived death 3 times.
Yeah, she's been quite sickly, bless her.
Eventually, 9 years into the marriage, in October, she gave birth to her first surviving child, Paul Petrovich.
Yeah, so like in Nordic and to an extent here, you've got son of. So like if you're like Ben's dad is John, so Ben would technically be Ben Johnson.
Oh, right, yeah.
He was Paul, son of Peter, so he'd be Paul Petrovich.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. He was the heir apparent to the throne and did succeed to it in 1706. Didn't keep it long, though, as he was murdered in 1801 at St. Michael's Castle.
Yeah, that was not pretty. He was legally and to all intents and purposes the son of Tsar Peter III, but in her memoirs, Catherine did seem to imply that Soltykov was actually his father. He did seem to look more like Peter III than Soltykov, which apparently was not a very flattering thing. But short of exhuming him and doing a DNA test, we can't really know for sure. So we've got, we can pretty much guess he probably was Peter's son, and she was just saying no to stick the knife in. But yeah, we've got her saying one thing and history saying the other.
Yeah, well, talking about that, Peter was actually aware of Catherine's infidelity and is quoted as having said, "God knows when my wife gets her pregnancies," though he wasn't exactly innocent on that score himself.
No. She then gave birth, Catherine being she, gave birth to a daughter in December 1757, possibly by another lover, Stanislav Poniatowski. Empress Elizabeth named her in honour of her late sister as Anna Petrovna, although Catherine was not in agreement with this at all. Catherine did not want her named that. But she couldn't go against the Empress. Elizabeth was godmother to Anna, again against Catherine's advice, and Elizabeth took her away to raise her, again against Catherine's wishes. But Anna didn't live for long. Sadly, she passed away in March 1759, aged only 15 months.
Oh, that's really... No death is nice, but that's really young.
It is. But strangely enough, there's no mention of Anna's death in Catherine's memoirs, and it seems that she never refers to her daughter after this. So after her death, after the funeral, she never again refers to Anna.
Oh, that's sad. She must have been quite traumatised, but I'd like to think that it was a traumatised thing and not a she didn't care thing.
It could be, but we'll explain some more later. She wasn't exactly the best of mothers. I mean, she was a great mother to Russia, not so much to her actual children. Yeah. She then had a second son, Alexei Grigorievich Babrinsky, with Count Grigory Grigorievich Orlov.
So her third lover.
Yeah. Yep. He survived to adulthood and died in his 50s.
Pretty good for back then.
Yep. She had a final child. Now, the reason we said 3 earlier is that 3 recognised to be children, legitimate children of Catherine. The last child, Elizabeth Grigorevna Temkina, was never formally recognised by Catherine. After her birth in July 1775, she was given over to the Samuilov family and raised by them. Rumour has it that she was the daughter of Catherine and Grigory Potemkin, another one. But this is disputed. So while she had the daughter and to all intents and purposes gave birth to her and handed her off to this other family, she never formally recognised her.
But she gave birth to her. How can she just be like, oh, what is this? What is this child that's just fell out of me?
She can give birth to her, but if she doesn't formally recognise her, then she will have no entitlement to titles, lands, to the throne, nothing like that. She could probably be a princess or a Grand Duchess through the Samuilov family, but she would not be any kind of royal and she would not be in the succession.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
Among Catherine's modern-day descendants, we have the current Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, Charles, the Prince of Wales, William, the Duke of Cambridge, and Harry. She's also a common ancestor in the royal families of Denmark, Holland, Sweden, and Spain.
Yeah,
so she did, just a tad. So there's a little bit of Catherine still scattered all around.
Yeah. She became increasingly dissatisfied with her marriage.
Shocker.
That was not rehearsed.
I love that.
And instead turned to books for solace. She enjoyed reading the likes of Voltaire and Tacitus, who helped her with her political ambitions. Empress Elizabeth was not happy about Catherine's extramarital affairs, however, and refused to allow them rights to the throne unless a natural heir was produced.
That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I get that.
She even went so far as to blackmail them, because Catherine and Peter had been implicated in a plot against her to basically supplant her with Catherine and Peter.
Oh, shit.
And she basically blackmailed them with this and said, Peter, you cannot ascend the throne. Catherine, you cannot ascend the throne or have any more lovers unless you give me a legitimate heir.
Okay, I get that. I kind of see where she's coming from.
Yeah. So maybe by saying that Paul was not Peter's son was also a knife into Elizabeth as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Catherine was therefore forbidden to have lovers until this natural heir was produced. After this job was done, however, she went to town with all the lovers. Just had them all.
She also ironically became friends with the sister of Peter III's most prominent lover. This was Ekaterina Vorontsova-Dashkova, who was also one of his lovers. So she was the sister
He
of
kept
one of
it in
his
the
lovers.
family.
Yeah. But they became good friends, and over time, Catherine began to get involved with and support various groups that opposed her husband, and some of them were actually introduced to her by Dashkova. So, it's like she became friends with her lover's wife, and also introduced her lover's wife to people that could overthrow her lover.
Of course she did.
Russia. She obtained military support through one of her other lovers, Grigory Orlov, and this was mixed with the support of the people who appreciated her demonstrated love for Russia and her progressive attitudes.
So some people in Russia did actually like the way she was doing stuff.
Yeah. Russia was incredibly backwards at this point. So very backwards. And the majority of it was controlled by religious factions, by the Orthodoxy Church. So it was very, very backwards. And it kind of unfortunately stayed that way for a good couple of 100 years after, although Catherine did do wonders for it.
Oh, fab.
So, what do you do when you've got a monarch that you don't particularly want to be the monarch?
A coup.
Exactly. After the death of Elizabeth in 1762, Peter ascended the throne, as you do, as Tsar Peter III. By this point, he and Catherine were mostly estranged, living in separate palaces except for formal functions. So they had to keep up that pretense, they had to keep up that face to the world, but on the whole, could not stand each other.
Well, at least they kept it going. At least they realised that Russia was important.
Yeah, they stayed together for the kids.
And the country.
Kids being the country.
Fact. Yeah. Then in July 1762, Catherine's hand was forced when one of her co-conspirators was arrested by Peter.
Yeah, basically, if they tortured it, she could be implicated, and it would potentially mean death for her.
Yeah, definitely. So on the 9th of July, she left the palace where she was staying near
Oranienbaum,
and went to her main military support,
Ismailovsky Regiment,
and she asked them for protection against Peter.
Quite a clever thing, playing the helpless female, like, my husband's coming after me, help me, help me, help me.
Mm-hmm.
The regiment agreed, and they accompanied her to the Semenovsky barracks, where she was declared sole ruler. So at that point, they were emperor and empress together, but Peter had the overarching vote on everything. But she was declared sole ruler, empress of Russia, which effectively ousted Peter from power merely 6 months after he had obtained it.
Wow, she didn't work slow, did she? She didn't take any time.
She really didn't, because with her newfound power, she ordered Peter's arrest.
Christ. And because of this, he was forced to sign his own abdication, meaning that she would go uncontested as sole occupant of the imperial throne of Russia.
All of this took place within 2 days.
Mate.
So from her companion being arrested to her taking power and having him abdicate was within 2 days.
Wow.
8 days later, on the 17th of July 1762, at the Palace of Ropsha, Peter III died under mysterious circumstances. It isn't actually known how he died, though the autopsy stated hemorrhoidal colic and an apoplexy stroke. So basically a stroke that effectively paralysed him, and then he hemorrhaged from his anus.
That's hardcore.
Yep. It's never been confirmed, but there are rumours that his death was at the hands of Alexei Orlov, Grigory Orlov's brother. the brother of one of her lovers,
Oh,
and the father of one of her children.
wow.
Yeah. She was crowned in Moscow in September 1762 as Catherine II, or Ekaterina, as they would say it. There were various challenges to her reign and uprisings, as most rulers have to contend with, but she managed to hold on to power for 34 years.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's not bad in those days. I mean, Elizabeth was 20 years, she was 34. As in Elizabeth, the one before her, not our Elizabeth.
No, not our Elizabeth's. So during her reign, Catherine was ambitious and she wanted to create a court that rivaled Versailles in power and decadence. But the state treasury was all but empty on the death of Elizabeth.
Yeah, so basically they were poor.
Yeah, she took property from the clergy and used it for non-religious purposes, a process called
secularizing.
So that just means where they...
Yeah, so basically if you're secular, you're non-religious. Okay. So if you secularize something, you take it away from religion and give it to, like, the state.
Oh, okay. So almost like what Henry did with the monasteries, but not...
Basically, yeah.
Not...
Yeah, he secularized it, but he then secularized it into another religion.
Ah, okay. This was a big deal, as the clergy owned nearly a third of all the lands and serfs, the lowest of the peasants' class, in Russia at that time.
Yeah, serfs were basically slaves.
Yeah.
But they were kind of like, they were that fine line between slaves and peasants.
Yep.
So they had it really rough. She established cordial relations with Prussia so as to avoid further war, as well as maintaining existing alliances with France and Austria.
That's clever.
Yeah, it's good foreign policy.
Yet she resolved boundary issues for Poland in 1764 through the installation of former lover
Stanisławski Poniatowski
as king.
She soon realised that the reforms she wished to bring in wouldn't necessarily work in Russia, though, which must have been disheartening.
Yeah, she was trying, and imagine like building something up for ages to find out that's actually not going to work.
Yeah, she had a good idea, but it didn't quite go to plan. Basically, she set up a commission in 1767, for all but the serf classes to ask what people wanted. Bear in mind the serf class is huge, so it wasn't an accurate representation of the populace, but it was an accurate representation of the other classes. The purpose of this was to set up a form of constitution. This lasted for months, but it all came to nothing. The hope was that the constitution would become a law code that could move Russia forward, but it basically fell flat. They argued for months, but didn't decide on a single thing.
Oh. Yeah. Helpful. In 1768, Russia went to war with Turkey, and Catherine used this chance to change tack slightly. Instead of making Russia progressive and Western, she would make it great and powerful.
Yeah, so she didn't want to emulate the Western courts. She then wanted to rival the Western courts.
Yeah. At first, the war with the Ottoman Empire, or is now Turkey, was going well, and Russia won a great naval victory at
Chisme
in 1770. This ignited national zeal and grew the love of the Empress in the hearts of many of her people. Obviously, winning a war is going to make people like you and think that you're good. And
yeah, if in doubt, give them a bit of military might.
Yeah.
Everyone's a sucker for military might. Then it kind of went wrong.
Right.
In the early 1770s, Moscow fell victim to quite a bad plague. It led to a lot of dissatisfaction in the populace, and as our previous episode, We're Not Russian This Revolution, can show, when the Russian people get miffed, things do not go well for the Tsars.
No.
In 1768, there was an uprising in Poland against her former lover, so Catherine sent in military aid. The rebels countered by allying with Turkey, and started the Russo-Turkish War.
So another war with Turkey.
Yeah.
Right.
Russia was... Well, this actually started off the war with Turkey earlier.
Oh, okay.
Russia was victorious, but then Austria reared up and threatened Russia. In the end, Russia and Austria agreed to partition Poland between them in 1772.
Split it in half.
Yeah, basically.
Cool. In 1773, an uprising began back home in Russia, unmatched in size until the 1917 uprising, in fact. And this was led by none other than the former Tsar Peter III. Yeah, the dead one.
It was actually led by Yemelyan Pugachev, who was previously an officer in the Don Cossacks, who was pretending that Peter was in fact still alive. Reports differ as to whether he was just pretending that Peter was alive or pretending to be Peter.
Okay.
But either way, the idea was that Peter was still alive and he was going to replace Catherine.
Ah.
It began in the Ural region, and in June 1774, they were prepared to march on Moscow. So it was short-lived, but it came pretty damn close.
Oh, God.
Russia won the war against Turkey after the signing of the Treaty of Küçük-Kaniacari in 1774. Catherine was then able to turn her attention to the domestic troubles. So it's basically like, I've beat them, now you.
Yeah.
It's basically your parents dealing with something at school and then coming home and just calling you by your full name.
Oh, God.
Like, Rebecca.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
The rebellion was quickly crushed, and the leader Pugachev was captured and executed by beheading in 1775. She don't mess around, Catherine.
No, she doesn't. But this did give her a pause for thought, however. The people were a dangerous weapon that could be used for or against her.
Yeah.
So, what do they say? Like, what is it in A Bug's Life? Yeah, I'm putting it to Disney. In A Bug's Life, there's Hopper. He's the grasshopper. And he's, like, wanting to win. And then they're like, if the ants realise they outnumber us, we're screwed. So it's almost like she knew that if they turned on her, then she was screwed.
Like there's a line in V for Vendetta as well. It's like
I go to Disney.
You go to V for Vendetta. Yeah, people should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
Yeah, definitely. But prior to becoming empress, Catherine had planned to emancipate the serf class of Russia, giving them freedom and the right to a wage or to own land on which they worked, which is really nice. Yeah. But now she saw clearly that this would not be in her best interests, not because the serfs would rise against her, but because the powerful landowners would.
Yeah, much like the Atlantic slave trade, a landowner was considered wealthy not because of the acres of land he had or the crops, etc. he produced, but rather the serfs that he owned. The more souls he had to work his land, the wealthier and more powerful he was. Just as a slight FYI, the serfs were emancipated about 100 years later by Alexander II. In reward for this, he got assassinated. He got blown up by a bomber stepping out of his carriage.
Oh.
Yeah, everyone who ever did any good for the Russians, they assassinated. Anywho, as much as it upset her, Catherine did know that she needed the allegiance of the owners rather than the serfs, because the serfs were many, but they couldn't raise an army. She imposed serfdom in the Ukraine, which had previously been free, and distributed the lands from the crown to her favourites.
That's good. It's keeping her people close and on her side, which is what you need.
But unfortunately, it's then effectively enslaving a previously free nation.
Yeah. Whilst this did serve to keep the people that she needed to be loyal to her, it also meant the serfs were worse off under Catherine than they had ever been before. Complete opposite to what she wanted. A classic case of the needs of power over the passion of the individual in power.
Yeah, it's like she wanted to free them, she wanted to give them so much better, but she couldn't do it.
No.
And to be fair, if she had have tried, she would have been opposed, it would have gone wrong, and she probably would have been removed from power and they'd have been stuffed anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not saying that it was right.
Well, no, definitely
No. She had mixed success with the merchant class. She did originally regulate merchant activities, which didn't quite work. It sort of bottlenecked them. Her next step was to encourage farmers from Germany to the Volga region, so the Volga River Valley, who brought more modern farming methods into the area. As you say, Russia was backwards, but the Germans did bring like some decent farming methods in, which increased produce.
Yeah, and in 1768, the first paper money was printed by the
Assignation.
That made no sense to me. Assignation Bank. Branches opened in St. Petersburg and Moscow, and then branched out into other towns. These paper rubles stayed in circulation until 1849.
Yeah. She worked to expand education, especially female education, and placed emphasis on the arts and sciences. So she, aside from the serfs, she wanted education for all Russian citizens.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. Catherine then began to set her sights once again on expansion, particularly the European lands currently under the control of the Ottoman Empire / Turkey.
Yeah.
She sought help from Austria in this and made a move. In retaliation, Turkey again declared war on Russia in 1787. Didn't go so well for them the first time, but they thought, you know what, we'll try again. You're coming into my garden, war.
Fact.
Yeah. This lasted for 4 years, but led to the annexing of the Crimea, and Russia were able to claim a lot of land from the Ottoman Empire.
So it did not go well for Turkey once more.
No.
Catherine had an ambition to reach Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, which is which is the capital of the Ottoman Empire. She was unable to do so, though, and she was steadily losing alliances with European powers, including Austria.
So she was like, it was a good friend. It's great. Russia, you're great as long as you stay on your side of the fence. However, you're coming into Europe, not so great.
No.
Don't like it.
Go away.
For a second time, there was an uprising in Poland, because also they didn't learn the first time. Leading to more Polish territory being annexed in 1793, because it didn't go well for them.
Mm-hmm.
This time between Russia and Prussia. It was fully annexed by the end of 1794 and split between Austria, Prussia, and Russia. So Poland rose up twice and basically ended up losing all of their land to Austria, Prussia, and Russia.
That's a mouthful. Say that 5 times fast.
Nope. So we're now coming, that's like throughout her reign.
Yeah.
So we're now coming towards the end of her reign. Throughout her reign, her eldest son Paul was being groomed for leadership. He was the heir apparent, is what you'd do. The trouble was, he tended to take after his father. And that meant that Catherine wasn't happy to hand over to him when the time came. She found that he was emotionally unstable and, quite frankly, weak. Instead, she put a plan into motion to remove him from power and name his son Alexander as her heir.
So her grandson?
Yeah, her
okay.
grandson. Unfortunately,
before this could be completed, however, Catherine suffered from a debilitating stroke, and she died on the 17th of November, 1796, and Paul, her son, succeeded her.
As we say, he was later assassinated.
Yeah.
But he kind of, middle finger up to Mummy Dearest.
Pretty much.
Yeah. He did have a reason for not necessarily liking her.
Okay. Talking about, this, you've seen The Great.
Yes.
The TV show that's recently come out about Catherine.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet. I want to. It's literally on my list. I'm waiting. Lockdown's ruined for me because my husband doesn't watch the same shows as I do. And he's a chef, so he's literally not working. So I need to find time to watch the shows that I want to watch that I know he doesn't want to watch.
Stick him on his VR.
Oh, I might have to because I really want to watch it. But does what we've just said, does it kind of marry up some? Are there things are there multiple lovers? Are there wars? What's it focus on?
Yes, there are. Well, there is one particular lover, and the hint of another one. But it does and it doesn't. It's not, and it's quite open about it. It doesn't say that it's necessarily historically accurate. It does say that it says she comes from Prussia. It says that she's an outsider. The people at court aren't great with her. Her husband is a despotic, alcoholic Egypt,
played by Nicholas Hoult, isn't it?
Yeah, I could almost forgive him for that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's tongue in cheek with the history.
Okay.
It's on the whole, it is quite correct, but it does play fast and loose with some things. So it says that Peter is the son of Peter the Great rather than his grandson. That Empress Elizabeth wasn't actually the empress; she's his scatty aunt that likes to train butterflies. Yeah, I wish you could see Em's face right now. But no, it's very good and it is very funny. And if you're kind of looking to get a foothold on Catherine the Great, it's a good place to start because it's good humoured and it introduces you to some of the names and some of the events. But yeah, you want something more like the 2015 Russian version, Ekaterina, or the Helen Mirren Catherine the Great.
Oh, so it's quite, if you're watching the new The Great, take it with a pinch of salt sort of thing.
Yeah, take it with a pinch of salt and enjoy it for what it is. It's just a funny period drama.
Huh.
It's very funny.
I'm definitely going to it's on my watch list. It really, really is. But back to the real Catherine. While some of her policies were less than ideal, she did leave quite a legacy behind, not least of all the military victories against uprisings in the Russo-Turkish Wars.
Yeah, she actually managed to expand the Russian territory by over 200,000 square miles west and south. Trade expanded, and she successfully managed to make the court a beacon for culture amongst the other courts of Europe. So she did really well with what she wanted to. She promoted literature and culture of Russia throughout Europe. That's why we've got the likes of Leo Tolstoy and like War and Peace, things like that, because of her, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, because of the groundwork she laid. And she was lucky enough to have an era named after her, the Catherinian era. And the only other women who've done that include Elizabeth I, the Elizabethan era, and Victoria, the Victorian era of England. So it's very, very rare for a woman to have an era named after her. So
That's fancy.
well done.
She started a private collection, which has been added to by subsequent monarchs, and is now the
Hermitage
museum, and it's in former Winter Palace in St. Petersburg.
I've been lucky enough to go there, and firstly, if you are going to go, take a guide. Russia's not necessarily, I mean, it's a wonderful place, but it's not always amenable to Western people, which is fair, Iron Curtain and all that. And there are a lot of pickpockets. But if you can, St. Petersburg is a beautiful city. The people there that I've met were lovely and friendly. The food is good, but the Hermitage, oh my God, it's incredible.
Is that the palace with the different colours?
It's blue on the outside.
Oh,
blue
yeah.
And gold. But it's an absolutely stunning. Any of the old Russian palaces are absolutely stunning, and it's a testament to how decadent and how opulent. They had rooms made out of gold and crystal.
That's hardcore.
It's insane. But I was lucky enough to visit the Hermitage, and I also saw the where she's buried.
Oh.
So the St. Peter Paul place and the Church of Spilled Blood where Alexander was assassinated. And I've also been lucky enough to see her palace, Catherine Palace, which will put a picture on Instagram of one of the rooms in Catherine Palace, which we'll come back to later.
Wow.
But you're not allowed to take pictures inside that room, and I was so gutted because I would have loved to have snapped photos everywhere.
All of the photos.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And honestly, the artwork, the sculpture, I prefer sculpture to art personally, just because yeah. But it was amazing. So good.
Oh, you sent me some photos when you were there, I remember.
Yeah, entire like massive, like 3-4 foot vases made entirely out of jade.
Wow.
And precious stones. It's just like
there's some money in that room then.
The mind
Christ.
It absolutely boggles.
Catherine also corresponded often with French writer and philosopher Voltaire, and there was a deal of mutual respect between them, with Voltaire calling her the Star of the North. They never actually met, however, but she felt his loss keenly on his death.
Yeah, she really badly went into grief after losing him.
So they were like pen pals?
Yeah, they were.
They were.
She assisted in the publication of the Encyclopédie by Diderot, who was apparently another one of her lovers, after the French government put a stop to it. She also published her own work, Instructions for the Guidance of the Assembly.
Assembling of what?
Just like the General Court Assembly.
Oh, okay.
She issued an edict in 1773 called the Toleration of All Faiths Edict, which permitted the worship of Islam within Russian territory. Because they'd taken over a lot of the Ottoman territory, had a lot of Moors and Islam there. It allowed for the building of mosques, practice of religious traditions, and even the pilgrimage to Mecca.
That's cool. That's very not that she shouldn't be tolerant, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, considering the time, it was quite tolerant.
And I think religion was a massive, even now, is a much more important part of the world.
Yeah, and religion and rule were like hand in hand.
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about England, where it went from Catholic to Protestant, like
ding 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 ding.
Yeah, it's like a massive deal. So that's really not good of her.
Yeah. She also extended it to an extent to the Jews. The Jewish population were integrated partially into Russian society when Poland was annexed, though they were prohibited from joining the middle class. So they could do everything they wanted to, but not join the middle class, which was more like your merchant classes. So there were some limitations, and this was mainly due to the merchants being averse to Jewish trade stepping on their toes. I mean, it is kind of a cultural thing. I want to say slander, but at the same time I don't. That Jewish people are good at business. They're good with money.
Yeah.
But to an extent, it is true. They are good with money.
It's like a stereotype.
That's the word I was looking for.
There you go. It's like a stereotype, but not in a negative fashion.
Yeah, and the merchant class of Russia were worried about that. So they could join, they could integrate, they could worship, they could do what they want, but they just could not be part of the merchant class. They could still have businesses and everything, they just weren't allowed to step up to that class.
Ah, fair. Paul was neglected. This is her son, Paul, was neglected to the point that he fell out of his crib as a baby and no one noticed. And he was left to spend the night on the floor.
Yeah.
That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, I get why he wasn't a fan of his mother.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's not fab.
So she took care of the people, but not necessarily her own children. She also had a rival to the throne, Ivan VI, assassinated when he was only 23 years old.
Cool.
Apparently he wasn't sane, he wasn't in his right mind, so she thought he would be better off dead.
But if he wasn't in his right mind, he probably wouldn't have been able to rule anyway, so why didn't they just leave him?
Yeah, because, rulers have to be sane.
Shh.
She got herself inoculated against smallpox, much to the advice of against the advice of most of the court, and she actually did it as well to her son Paul. Luckily, it worked. Otherwise, both the Empress and heir apparent would have perished.
That's a really big risk to take.
Yeah. Basically, the way they did it back then, it wasn't the injection that we know now. It was a less refined version, and they do actually show this in The Great, where you have a wound and you have infected smallpox pus from a dead person. So it's a dead version of the virus that you put into your cut, into your bloodstream.
Why?
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't catch it. She was immune.
Fair. Well done. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Paul was immune, so then his children would have been immune. So yeah, cool.
I guess that was good. She designed and created the imperial crown, used right by subsequent monarchs right up to the end of the Romanov line in 1917.
Again, we'll put a photo of that as well as the special room later, because it's just stunning. So many jewels.
Yeah, our post for this may just be filled with also photos.
Yeah. She had a red room.
Hey.
The Nazis found it when they stormed St. Petersburg, and they photographed it, but all the furniture has not survived, unfortunately. But
they liked to ruin stuff, didn't they?
We're talking beds, sex swings, kinky chairs, everything.
Wow.
Yeah. She also apparently had a foot fetish, employing full-time foot ticklers, who, amongst other things, would sing bawdy songs and try and arouse her anytime she wanted, just by tickling her feet.
Oh.
Now, the special room. It's called the Amber Room, and it's in the Catherine Palace, just outside of St. Petersburg. And it was destroyed in World War II, and the Nazis took apart the precious stones. They basically hoarded it all. The originals were never found, but the room itself has since been recreated in exquisite detail, though you are not allowed to take photos. It's called the Amber Room because the floors, the walls, the columns, the ceiling are made out of tiles of amber.
Christ.
It is probably one of the most expensive rooms in existence, but it is absolutely stunning. So pretty. I really wish I was lucky enough to see it in the daylight. It was a rainy day, but at that moment when we were in there, the sun just came through the clouds, and the whole room was just a glowing orange. It was so beautiful.
Christ. That sounds really pretty, but mate, I'd be scared to even walk in there.
Yeah. It was, I mean, they had a little carpet so that you didn't walk directly on the floor. So it was fine. But still. Keep your bags tightly tucked in, everything tucked in, don't touch a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has passed partly into legend, particularly in relation to false stories surrounding a horse. That was one of the reasons people said that she died because she had sex with a horse. She didn't, it was a stroke. An autopsy afterwards found it was a stroke. But right. Yeah, there were legends going around that she had sex with a horse involving an intricate pulley system.
Oh.
I mean, if she wanted to, that's perfect. Well, it's not perfectly fine.
No, it's illegal.
It's illegal, but we try not to judge. But she's certainly not a historical female to take lightly.
No. She
has been featured in many cultural references, such as books, TV series, films, and even an online historical rap battle.
Against whom?
I'm not 100% certain.
I need to find this.
Yeah, we need to find it. I think it's other historical figures.
Fun.
Yeah. So that is Catherine the Great.
That's cool. I didn't really know that much about her. I've wanted to watch the TV show. But yeah.
It's a good laugh.
Yeah, I'm going to. So, ridiculous deaths.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking into this and I wanted to find something around in Russia. But there really isn't that many people.
Or if they did, they probably didn't document it.
Yeah, or Russians are clever. They just don't die in ridiculous ways.
Yeah, this could be that too.
Yeah. So I went for somebody from the 1700s, around the same time period.
Okay.
And I found somebody called Hannah Tynoy. I think it's Twynnoy.
Is it Twin Eye? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Hannah.
and Hannah. She lived from 1669 to like 1703.
Mm.
And she lived in a little market town in England of Malmesbury in Wiltshire.
Okay.
She was a barmaid, and she worked in a pub called the White Lion, which is quite a common English pub name. And while she was there, a circus came to town.
Okay.
And it had a menagerie, so it had loads of different animals that came with this circus.
Mhm.
One in particular was a tiger.
Oh, tiger. Murder floof.
Yeah, all the fluff. They were there for about a month, but she spent a couple of weeks prior to her death teasing this tiger. It was in like a cage, not like it was humane for the times. It was quite a big cage, and even against the owner and the ringmaster's like advice to leave the tiger well alone. It's a tiger.
Murder floof.
She was teasing it. She was poking it. She was prodding it. She was banging the cage. She was showing it food and pulling it away.
I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, she is famed for being the first person in Britain to be eaten by a tiger. I say eaten. She wasn't like the whole of her was devoured. But it does say that after about a week of this woman just going and at this tiger, this poor tiger, it broke free, and as she tried to run, it caught her gown and ripped her to shreds. Like limbs torn apart, head off, insides everywhere.
I'm not just saying this because I love tigers, but I do. But tigers usually are, as cats, quick killers. They take it down and then they eat it. They're not the kind to go in and tear to shreds. That is anger. That's malicious. She peed this tiger off.
Yep, definitely. And all that remains is she had her gravestone in the corner of a churchyard of Malmesbury Abbey. So she's still like spoken about, especially in Malmesbury in Wiltshire. Almost like a legacy, because not only did she die in horrific ways, she is the first recorded person to have died by a tiger.
I mean, it was her
in
own
Britain
fault.
ever. Yeah, she went against everything. It's literally, you know, they said, "Oh, don't poke the bear. Don't poke a freaking tiger."
Especially not for over a week.
Yeah. But in Wiltshire, they do still like not immortalise her per se, but she has a legacy. In 1993, a new residential road was named Toyney Close, so she had a road named after her.
Okay.
And then in 2003, on what would have been the 300th anniversary of her death, they held a simple ceremony at her graveside where every schoolgirl in the town who was 11 or younger, named Hannah, placed a flower on her grave.
That's cute.
It's quite nice. But yeah.
Don't mess with the tiger, though.
Oh no, definitely. And the reason we know about this is because on her grave actually has I know graves do tend to have quite a bit of writing on them.
Yeah.
Her grave has quite a what's the word I'm looking for? Poem, I guess.
Epitaph?
That's the word. It obviously says her name, and she died at 33, and it was on the 23rd of October in 1703. And on
Lots of threes.
And on it says, "In the bloom of life, she's snatched from hence. She had not room to make defence. For tiger fierce took life away, and here she lies in a bed of clay until the resurrection day." So they've written on her plaque that she got killed by a tiger.
Yeah. Had no time to make defence because the tiger turned around and got her.
It's almost like someone coming up to you and poking you for like a week, and you turning around and punching him in the face. Yeah. Except the tiger didn't punch her, it ate her.
I mean, tiger probably tried to punch, but tiger has claws and paws as big as your head and big teeth.
So if you take anything away from this podcast, is do not piss off a tiger.
No.
But that's all from us. Oh. Okay, I think I need to talk to Carrie about the dangers of tigers. So while I do that, we will bid you farewell, and we'll be back with you as soon as possible. I'm not going to promise a day or when. We have lots of ideas, But me and Carrie do tend to have ideas and they just kind of sit there and not come to fruition. But
Procrastination.
Yep. But we will be back as soon as we possibly can. Thank you so much for listening and to listening to all of our other episodes that are doing so well, and it makes us so happy.
Like, genuinely really happy.
So very happy. So we'll be back with you soon. Take
Stay
care.
safe.
Bye.
Bye.